Hello and welcome. My name is Beth Kelly, and I have the honor to serve as the Vice President for Education, Research, and Historical Interpretation for the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. We are so glad you joined us for Us, Past, Present, Future. Today we're going to talk about the economy in Williamsburg. Our interpretations and programs center on the story of Williamsburg in the 1770s, which was a time when the local economy was driven by being the capital for the colony of Virginia. It was a hub for trade, commerce, and businesses to serve travelers who were primarily coming as representatives of the government. There were taverns that provided lodging, food, a place to stable horses and carriages, laundresses that could do your washing while you were in town. Merchants sold necessary, but also luxury goods, and tradespeople provided much needed one-of-a-kind services like shoemaking, cabinet making, and wig making. Entertainments like plays, concerts, scientific lectures were delights only found in urban centers like Williamsburg. In general, Williamsburg attracted wealthy Virginians who had the need to travel here and the money and time. The toil and labor were done, for the most part, by workers who were enslaved. For any business owner, more people traveling into town meant additional work and longer hours to meet their needs. It may have crossed your mind, what happened to the economy when the capital moved west to Richmond in 1780? Many of the businesses went with relocation of the government. Williamsburg remained a college town, but the booming economy was gone. The 1926 purchase of the first building of the restoration brought renewal to the area. Artisans, craftsmen, landscapers, architects, historians all moved to discover old Williamsburg and bring it back to its Revolutionary era glory. What did this do to the economy? It shifted businesses to focus more on a tourist economy. The physical restoration of the 18th century town displaced existing businesses to new parts of town, and this was particularly true for Black-owned businesses. An economy emerged in the 1950s and 60s that was focused on providing lodging, dining, and entertainment to travelers who had the leisure time and could afford to make the journey. While Williamsburg's economy remains heavily dependent on hospitality and tourism, today our diverse labor force includes locals, college students, and international workers with J-1 visas. Like your community, the pandemic limited the operation of business, with parts of our population without work for over a year. Reopening restaurants, hotels, and service industries has proven difficult, for labor is hard to find. We find ourselves asking, how do we adapt to a labor shortage? Do we continue to invite people to visit us without being able to offer them the amenities they need? This is a unique time for our community as we wrestle with these questions, and I'm sure we are no different from your community. While we start the conversation in our community, we hope you will continue it in your own community. We appreciate you joining us for Us, Past, Present, Future.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Us, Past, Present, and Future, Business and Politics. Today, we are going to discuss business and politics in Williamsburg, and also how businesses and entrepreneurs have adapted to changing political circumstances over the centuries. I'm your moderator, Hope Wright, and joining us today are our panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Hope.
You're welcome.
Karen Clancy. I'm the master weaver with Colonial Williamsburg. I've been here for 34 years and worn lots of hats, but this is the opportunity that I've had for the last few years serving my passion. So,
thanks, Karen. My name is Michelle DeWitt, and I'm currently the Assistant City Manager with the City of Williamsburg. Been in that job for 3 weeks. So, prior to that, I was the city's Economic Development Director for the past 16 years. So that's what brings me here today to discuss business and politics.
Well, thank you so much, Karen and Michelle. We're going to start by looking at business and the economy in Williamsburg before, during, and just after the Revolution. Our first question is, what was Williamsburg's local economy like prior to the Revolutionary War?
Williamsburg is a government town. And so as a government town, you have the support infrastructure to handle the business of governing. Virginia was a big chunk of real estate. Not only did we have Virginia proper that we are familiar with today, but it extended to Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, parts of Pennsylvania, to include Pittsburgh. So it was huge, and to manage and govern, those outreaches, took a lot of folks knowing about those places. So you had a lot of travelers coming from the frontier. You've got people coming from Norfolk, big port town, huge port town, and we're halfway between Richmond and Norfolk. So we have a myriad of folks traveling in and out of Williamsburg, along with the folks, as twice a year the court was in session, so the town swells with folks that represent their communities and their counties. And you have that infrastructure, and as Beth mentioned, some luxury goods. So before the war, you're going to find things that are very specialized. I always say in our shop that coming to Williamsburg is like going to Paris, and you're going to find those unique opportunities and those unique services and methods and the diversity of people that come to those locations. So it was a vibrant community. However, when the town wasn't engaged in a lot of businesses, there was about 1,800, 2,000 people, but 52% were enslaved to support those families. So you had Native Americans coming in to do business and selling things, bringing foodstuffs to the palace, for example. So we still had, a wide range of folks traveling and coming into Williamsburg for various reasons.
It was a town of 2,000, which we would think of today as a kind of a sleepy little town, but there was a lot going on. What was the relationship like between business and politics before the revolution?
So, in terms of, some of the relationships, you're going to be fostering, you're going to see the same people in the same circles. You'll see, lawyers, and being taught by lawyers like Mr. Wythe, like Jefferson. You're going to see, the newspapers publishing what's happening in England versus what's happening maybe in the House of Burgesses. So there's going to be crossovers, and based on economy and how they're gaining their income, they may be working with Mr. Greenhow to bring their tobacco in and have their factor over in England. And depending on the political scene of England, trying to get imported goods and what's from all over the world. We've got ships coming in all the time. And the political relationships, for example, with England and Spain, where we, in our shop, get most of our dyes. And depending on the political relationships, the prices are going to fluctuate greatly. So that there's, politics kind of in a subliminal way, and then there's an overt way. So you may see some folks walking down the street as we get closer and closer to the revolution. And this idea of homespun, the age of homespun, where they're being very conscious of what folks are wearing. So if you're walking down the street, people would notice if you're still supporting the realm wearing, those imports versus, things that are made locally. So the age of homespun doesn't mean you're wearing a bunch of burlap. It just means buy local. Right. And it starts to kind of overflow as we start defining ourselves, whether we're patriots or loyalists, in that very simple act of, textiles. And so you start dividing just based on what you wear, which I find quite interesting. So.
And you mentioned homespun. There was actually a homespun ball.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Lord Botetourt?
Yeah, Lord Botetourt threw a big party for the King of England and for the King's birthday, and 100 wives of the wealthiest landowners showed up in homespun. And it's like showing up to the presidential inaugural ball in a flannel shirt and blue jeans. It's a soundbite. And so people are going to notice. And so it reached, newspapers from here to not only in the colonies, but to the Caribbean, and it was running for a year later,
Wow.
even in England. King got nervous because 1 out of 3 people were connected in England to the textile industry. And if we're starting to make our own cloth, that's how you can hit them in the pocketbook. If we're starting to kind of boycott those kinds of goods. Especially with some of the Navigation Acts, the Non-Importation Acts, so that you've got restrictions, and it's really going to put a damper on their economy. And how you communicated back then to convince 100 wealthy women to dress in homespun had to be a feat unto itself.
Yeah, so subtle but still very loud at the same time, very noticeable. Now, moving ahead a little bit, how did business people adapt during the time of the Revolutionary War?
So, for one of the things that we were not allowed to do was mass produce things. There's no factories of any kind, and so if you start to boycott certain items, and in response to like the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, Pickett Act. That you got to figure out plan B. And so factories started going up for the first time to start manufacturing. If you didn't know how to weave, there's going to be incentives to get folks on board so that we can, like sign-on bonuses today, so that we would lower the apprenticeship from a 7-year commitment to a 5-year commitment, and you'll be classed as a professional. So people are having to learn new skills, reinvent themselves, having to have no outlet for their major income producer, which is tobacco. You have to take care of your community, whether it's a family of 5 or a larger community of enslaved folks. In supporting that family, you still have to provide. So you go after government contracts. A few plantation owners converted tobacco barns into spinning houses, for example, to support the war effort. People are having to adapt quite quickly. However, if you're on the frontier and you may not get the word, for a while, and it may not affect you as much. So in urban centers, it tended to be more of an impact.
Well, we actually have a question from Carol in the audience. Thank you, Carol, for your question. And she would like to know, how were printers in Williamsburg affected by politics? And also, were the printers free to express their personal opinions?
That never happens today. So the printer was not allowed under British government to talk about the government, just the facts. In terms of what's happening in the government, because we're still English, right, before the war. So they had to print what was coming out of England, and they printed things that might be happening in the House of Burgesses, or who met, along with some social things, or, my horse was stolen, or, a myriad of things. But as far as opinions, probably not, or they wouldn't be in business very long. If you were contracted by the government as a government contractor, basically, that you're going to know where your bread's buttered, and you're not going to cross that line. The Stamp Act, when it came through, was a tax on anything paper, and the biggest impact it had was on lawyers and the government. So Williamsburg was really irritated over that tax. Because it was going to cost a lot of folks some extra money because of the amount of paper. And they started, and there was an anecdote where they were buying other paper from some other source, and they came down on them like a ton of bricks. You have to buy English paper. So there was monetarization of it as well. So,
thank you, Karen. We're going to move ahead a little bit to talk about the major changes in Williamsburg economy over time. So the Revolutionary War comes to an end, and a few years before that, the capital moves from Williamsburg to Richmond. So what happened to Williamsburg's economy when the capital of Virginia moved to Richmond?
Well, if you're in the business of a support industry or a contracting to the government, that most of the folks, like especially the printer, moves to Richmond. Other folks start seeing a dwindling of folks coming in, and how do you survive unless you've got a commodity that somebody really needs or a service you need? We still were that stopgap between Norfolk and Richmond. So, you know, the hospitality industry, as we call it today, your taverns, your and stabling, and maybe a farrier to put shoes on your horse, or any kind of repair service, a laundress, things that were going to be geared to travelers, were probably going to be able to survive. But a lot of folks moved to England, and or, you know, before, during, and after, you know, there was a lot of folks that decided to move back to England. You know, if they were loyalists and found that they may have opportunities more so. So it became a little quieter when the capital moved.
Yeah, most of the businesses moved. I think taverns went from a dozen taverns to about two taverns or so.
Yep.
The college remained, but
yes, and that's what we depended on, is that relationship with the college and education, and fostering, you know, that type of industry. So I think that was, you know, that partnership between the town and what would support the town. In what we, you know, is a symbiotic relationship. So it was and it was here before the town was here. So
Right.
So the town does stay and maintain and subsist, and it's about a period of 140 years or so between the end of the Revolutionary War to when Williamsburg becomes Colonial Williamsburg. So the creation of Colonial Williamsburg had serious impacts on the local economy. Can we talk about how the restoration changed the town?
It boggles my mind how one vision could come to fruition, and how, I know there were, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like a switch you threw and everybody was on board, but the revitalization and the vision and the purpose in our, you know, in what we stand behind as a foundation, it's just amazing to me, the partnership between the college and the church, and even the military had a little, you know, had an impact, as it has become since World War II a destination for lots of military folks for retirement and transitioning in and out as they deploy.
If you think of it in terms of sort of modern economic development, think about the Amazon announcement that landed in Northern Virginia, and how that is going to be a transformational event for Northern Virginia, for all of Virginia, for the East Coast. I think Rockefeller's investment here is akin to that. It's a tremendous amount of private dollars that came in, and all that spun off, and it was truly transformational, is my understanding.
Yep, and the willingness to go to such a length to make it right, and getting the craftsmen into, you know, build on the same foundations. Right. Archaeology in its younger years, you know, that they knew then that there was better technology in the future, and that's why we still do archaeology now. And having that vision to stop and not just level everything and build a facade of what they thought it might look like. You know, bringing in people that were, you know, experts in masonry. You know, the one fellow that could make like 1,000 bricks a day.
Wow.
And nobody has been able to match him ever. But the expertise and the talents that it had to all come together to make it work. And it took a village, literally. And our village grew because of it.
Right.
Highland Park, which is literally across the tracks, was constructed mainly to house those craftsmen building the city again.
And we see another area of the city that we now call Midtown, Midtown Row, which is a $120 million investment today going up, being constructed there. That in the 1950s was where Colonial Williamsburg built a suburban shopping center in order to meet those needs that had been pushed off of Duke of Gloucester Street or a traditional town environment to the suburbs, and what a role the foundation had in even efforts like that.
And that kind of leads into the next question. Anytime there is restoration and preservation, it oftentimes means that the people who have been living in an area, a city, town, a neighborhood, have to be displaced. And in the case of Colonial Williamsburg, it often meant Black residents or Black business owners. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, you know, Hope, I watched the February Us, Past, Present, and Future, which was a fabulous program that you did. And it talked quite a bit about that and how the distinction between how the Black citizens or residents were treated. They were compensated financially, but that was about it for whereas the white property owners were compensated but also helped in moving to a new location. So definitely a disparity there for sure. And we see that in other areas we talked about the government and the military, and Hampton Roads, which Williamsburg is part of, is considered the Pentagon of the South because we have so much federal activity here. I think there's 17 federal installations here and lots of workforce. And so you see, I've heard stories about that happening when Camp Perry was acquired and whole towns being moved and displaced. That's something that the City Council and the City of Williamsburg is very aware of. And in our vision, we have a vision for 2030 that we just announced, I guess, a year and a half ago. But it really speaks to wanting to be a place where everyone is welcome in Williamsburg. And we feel that the trends are to come back to small urban environments. People feel comfortable there. They're looking for that type of living, and we're walkable, we're bikeable, and so we hope that gentrification can kind of reverse, and as we look at bringing more people living in the city, that it's of all ages, all races, and diversity.
During this time that Williamsburg is transitioning into a museum, it shifts to a tourist economy. So now it's a travel destination, hotels and restaurants, these types of places. Can you talk a little bit about how that change affected the community?
Sure. So if you look at our economy in Williamsburg, it has two pillars, and the biggest one is hospitality that you just mentioned, driven by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, no doubt. And then the university, William & Mary, is also that educational pillar that has a lot of spin-off in our economy. But when you look specifically at tourism, it's a very volatile industry. It's a volatile industry within one year, 12-month period. January, February, beginning of March are very quiet. So those are times where there's not the needed economic activity, and so the people in those jobs have to figure something else out, right? And the business owners have to figure. Some businesses close for the month of January because there's just not that steady business. So the volatility of that is a challenge. And when you're an economy that's this dependent on it, you really feel it. You also see volatility throughout the decades. So 9/11 was a recent example of travel changing and people wondering what the impacts were in a change in how we're doing that leisure travel. COVID-19 pandemic is, and I think we'll talk about this more later, has been an extraordinary. It's impacted that industry extraordinarily. Right now, we're feeling a real, as people were vaccinated and things started to reopen, we had a labor shortage, and that's been seen throughout the nation, but we feel it here very deeply because of our dependence on tourism. And there's many reasons people aren't coming back in the workforce. I don't think you can point to one thing. It's people have found a higher wage job, gained some skills, or this was a good time that they could try out a different job that's in a different industry, or maybe they had childcare issues, which have blossomed during the pandemic, as we all know.
Yes.
Maybe they realize they're a second earner in the family, and it's more important to be with their family. And then lastly, there are unemployment benefits where people are earning more staying home, and you can't blame them for doing that. So there's all kinds of issues, economic issues related to a tourism economy, and those are just a few of them. I think you had said there was something during the revolution, you mentioned this earlier, the need to provide incentives and get people to do the work. Very much the same now.
There's always going to be challenges no matter what kind of crisis, or, because, we didn't have COVID, we had smallpox.
Right.
You've got, the controversy over, the smallpox vaccine, in the 18th century. So, how do you convince your neighbors and, that kind of thing. And war itself. And if you come back maimed and not have the medical attention or something that happens during that course, and you're left as a widow and having to reinvent yourself, trying to figure out how to make do. And if you've got a small business as a trade, who do you get in to help you with that? Even if you're the female running that business, you've got to have those resources. And at my age, I need a strong body, So, there's those life challenges that affect your economy of your own home. That's very, very similar to what we experienced last year and part of this year. So.
Right.
Well, that rolls right into looking at the city of Williamsburg and the economy today. What are challenges that Williamsburg and other towns face by relying so heavily on tourism?
Sure. So I think the biggest one by far is the labor shortage. And another element of that Beth mentioned in her introductory video that is the international student, the J-1 visa students who come over for a year and provide a workforce for us. And this is a popular destination for them to choose to come and work in the hospitality industry. And that has dried up because of the pandemic. Various reasons. Some are unable to get here, but some are also afraid if they come, they won't be able to get back home because of the pandemic. So that's been another struggle. I think something else that Williamsburg has felt, Greater Williamsburg is made up of 3 localities, York County, James City County, and the city of Williamsburg. And I concentrate my efforts, of course, on that city center. We saw development in the counties happen in the 1990s and the turn of the century, much later than most cities experienced that. Most cities experienced that after World War II with the availability of the automobile and the construction of suburban homes. We really didn't see that flight from the city or choices other than the city until the 90s or the turn of the century. And that's something Williamsburg has to work on every day. We used to be the only game in town, and now we're one of many. And we want to make sure we remain relevant, and so people will come spend their time and treasure here. And as I mentioned before, we want people to live here too, and we want diversity around that. It makes us a healthy community and an exciting, successful place to be.
Well, what are some things you think can help overcome the labor shortages that we're facing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting hearing Karen talk about what they did in the revolution. So we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing incentives, signing bonuses. If you come work, we're seeing wages going up as well. We're seeing owners rolling up their sleeves and working in the kitchen or making beds, or you see senior management doing that. And another thing we've noticed is businesses closing. So businesses who were open 6 or even 7 days a week are now closing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Found out that the other day I was trying to take someone to lunch. So it's just it's a struggle, and everyone's doing the best they can. I love your example of your body. You know, if you're an older business owner, you don't have the strength of the 18-year-old. So, but everyone's in there doing the best they can. We want our visitors to get the best experience when they come. So that means making difficult choices like closing a couple days a week.
Well, we all have been facing the challenge the last year, almost 2 years, with COVID. What actions did the Economic Development Council take in its response to the COVID pandemic?
Sure. So in the city, I had a team of 3 in the Economic Development Department, and we worked with the appointed Economic Development Authority and then City Council, just all arm in arm. Initially, we found that there was such a flood of information coming to our businesses that you couldn't consume it. It was too fast. You couldn't digest it. So we worked as a team of 3 to digest that information and we had allies across the region and at the state helping us with that. And we sent out a daily newsletter, e-newsletter to everyone. We also found that people just needed someone to talk to. They felt out of control. They were, when you're in that stress situation, it's hard to make decisions.
Yeah.
And so they just needed someone to counsel them and help them problem solve, really. We did a lot of that. Then came the financial assistance, and we're really proud to say that through the City Council and the Economic Development Authority, we put over $1.8 million on the street to our businesses. There's 800 businesses in the city of Williamsburg, so those we were able to help those who, some thrived during COVID. We found our counselors. Just as soon as we helped some of them, this is mental health counselors, we helped some of them switch. Once we helped them switch to the Zoom virtual environment, there was more need than they could meet, and they really did well. But there were others who, as you know, restaurants and hospitality in particular. So we actually put cash in their hands to help them apply for the federal program so they could keep their workforce paid during those times. So. It was very busy, but we got to know our businesses even better. I have to say it was an exhausting, stressful experience, but I think it was a good one. Williamsburg really stepped up. They did other things in conjunction with the university and with Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. We found a hotel that had closed and used that to house the homeless. Or people who were precariously housed, who needed a safe place to be, especially during COVID. We delivered groceries. We purchased groceries from our farmers at the farmers market. They no longer had customers coming because the market was closed. So the city purchased groceries from them and then hand delivered them to our 108 public housing units. So they got groceries every week. Also gave the rest to House of Mercy for distributions. And we saw all the businesses in the foundation. Everyone was doing things like this. So that part of it was really cool. As stressful as it was, it was great to see the community come together.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when somebody has a fire, you know, on a small scale, and that everybody just, we have that common bond, that common, need to help, and I think that's what makes us special here. I've never seen it so passionate, and so when the chips are down, people step up, even if they can't really afford it, or whether it's in time or in finances, but the willingness, to step up and help, just on a bigger scale, really.
People feel like they want to do something.
Absolutely.
Like they want to take action to help what's going on. How then does a town kind of safely balance tourism by keeping residents safe? And this is a good example with the pandemic.
Sure.
What are some ways that we can do that?
Yes. So, and Hope, another piece of that is the university. Half our population in the city of Williamsburg are students at William and Mary. And there was a lot of nervousness in the community when the students were going to come back. And what we found was the students led the way in wearing masks and socially distancing. And they set that example that our residents then followed, and also our visitors who were still coming because we were an outdoor environment, so people were still coming here to recreate. Those students really led the way. And then the college led the way on a pledge that the city and the university and the foundation took, that we'll all treat each other with respect and safely as we get through this. So that really helped set the tone. But then some specific things we did. We worked with Colonial Williamsburg to bring tables and chairs to Duke of Gloucester Street so people could be outside and could enjoy each other's company and hopefully also spend money in Merchant Square in a safe environment. the city closed parts of Prince George Street to allow that as well. We changed our zoning ordinances to allow other restaurants throughout the city to use parts of their parking lots for dining. So, so we were as responsive as quickly as we could be. The state helped with that. The governor declared an emergency, and that enabled us to quickly do these actions. And City Council was very progressive on making that happen and listening to those businesses. We have some ideas about how outdoor dining may work, but they had a better idea of how specifically the details should work. The ABC agent even was hand in hand with us. I know. She was, I was texting her at one point, but she was approving the outdoor dining as fast as we could get them to her. And typically they don't have that reputation. So that was really cool.
And what did you do or see in your shop, Karen?
So we were one of the biggest shops that could handle the requirement of 6 feet distancing, social distancing. We were outside. We moved our whole operation outside under a tent, and and we kept an eye on the weather because our tent doesn't hold water. And it made it so it was more comfortable for people who wanted to stay. It felt like it was a better environment that they could come and go as they wished, stay as long as they wanted. We were masked up, but we were, by geography, we were spaced out pretty well. And never had a cleaner shop. In terms of sanitizing and, wiping stuff down and being more cognizant, I think. I think it's the awareness that helps us get through the flu season or, when the kids go back to school and we have school season again back in March, where you're more conscious or it's more in the front of your brain than the back of your brain. It's been a real challenge for interpreters like myself, and I've talked to so many of my colleagues, that people with wearing masks, you can't read your audience as well. And so it becomes a guessing game. Are you reaching people? Are you, have I irritated somebody? Have I lost somebody?
It's kind of like this audience right now. We can't see you.
So we're not sure if we're hitting the mark, and I think that was one of the biggest things, and learning to enunciate and be louder through that fabric. So there's small adjustments, but it was still that, and I think it's that constant awareness that really wore you down. And the highlight during COVID was going to the grocery store. I'm like,
yes,
yay!
I know.
So. It was, I think, the lack of community in this digital age, which is great for lots of things, but attending church, on Zoom or whatever platform. It was, meeting, your boss on a screen. And I think that need for human contact, and just people and friends and family that you just wanted to hug, you're just like, go away.
Right.
So I think that was the biggest challenge. It was the humanness, the things that you had to stop doing, that you were, and learn to do new tricks, and change our logistics and our mechanics, trying to accommodate and do the best we could with the resources that we had. So it was challenging. We learned a lot about ourselves and our stamina, let me tell you. So.
We actually have a question from Robert in our audience. Thank you, Robert, for your question. And he would like to know, what portion of the economy is based upon the College of William and Mary, particularly for today's modern economy?
Sure, great question. So in the city of Williamsburg, and again, Greater Williamsburg is larger, but the city of Williamsburg is where I work. The university, the College of William and Mary, is our largest employer. So between 3,500 and 4,000 employees. So that right there is the impact. And the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation is a close second with its employees, but but the university is above that. And I think the second part of that is those 8,000 students who join us every year. In a direct way, they're spending power, right? So they come and they have to buy goods, and much like in the colonial days, everyone came to Williamsburg to buy their goods and stay at the taverns, get their laundry done. So they have to do all those things here. But then there's an intellectual value as well from the professors who are doing spin-off businesses, the grad students, the PhD students who are also doing spin-off businesses. 30% of what goes on at William & Mary is in applied science, and people don't realize that. So they're, they're doing solar battery storage and different things that can spin off, and we work with them on that. So now I've forgotten the question, but I think
What percentage? Right,
who is so by far the university is the biggest impact. Close second, Colonial Williamsburg as a tourism driver and an employer, though. And you look at what the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation does, it's very much a research education institute as well. You talked about the archaeology, but there's many more things going on, the trades that you're involved in. All of that has a huge intellectual capital value.
And there's always partnerships between the college and Colonial Williamsburg. I just had a delightful intern, for example. Anybody in public history, we've got a house dedicated in historic area for grad students, and had one as a volunteer. So we get return. I mean, it's just, from their knowledge and what they're doing, and we, hopefully can foster them into, other positions as they go through their chapters of their lives. So.
And we're seeing more of them coming back, so in their 30s. And Hope, I know you're a graduate, so you're still here, but our former mayor is also a graduate. We're seeing them coming back maybe in their 30s, so they've gone off and worked on Wall Street or done whatever the big fancy things are, and now they just crave this small town walkability, bicycle, and the ability to be part of the community. You can still go to a city council meeting and bring up an issue, and it will, if it's reasonable, it will be addressed. I mean, I remember when a 16-year-old neighbor of ours came to council and said, you limit tour guides to the age of, you must be 18 or older, and I'm 16, and I'm very mature, and I could do this, and so there was a policy debate based on her doing that. So that can still happen here, and I think people crave that. So they're coming back, they're either bringing their businesses with them because now they can work remotely, or they are starting new business. Virginia Beer Company is a great example. Chris and Robbie, alumni who love this community and found a way to come back and make that successful business.
Yeah, and the question was about the economic contributions, but I think relationship and what can come from relationship is just as, if not more important. We also have a question from Tina in our audience. Thank you, Tina. And she would like any comment on how Colonial Williamsburg helps its employees and the general community during COVID. I know you touched on that a little bit.
So y'all will probably know more than I do, but I could talk about a couple things top of mind. As I mentioned, the old Governor's Inn had been shuttered, and Colonial Williamsburg Foundation worked with the city to open that for those people who were precariously housed or homeless, and especially during a pandemic needed a safe place to be, especially if they got sick. Not only were they housed there, but Colonial Williamsburg provided 3 meals a day for them delivered to their door. So that was, and they were able to do that because the visitation wasn't coming. Right. And that kept the Colonial Williamsburg employees employed. Another huge one was the vaccination clinic, which for our area happened at the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center. And Colonial Williamsburg stepped up immediately, said, yes, we'll provide that space and make it work with the public, the emergency services of all 3 localities and the university as well. And the health department blessed it. So we were able to inoculate, feels like the revolutionary term, but we were able to vaccinate, vaccinate is the correct word, 20,000 shots were given in that facility that could not have happened without that infrastructure.
Well, as we're coming to our close, for our final thoughts, I wanted to ask, what is something our audience can do in their own communities to support their local economy or their local labor force?
Sure. So a couple things come top of mind. Buy local. So we all have heard this phrase, but it's really, in the day of Amazon, it's really easy to forget it. So remember what your local businesses provide and the services they can do. And often they will make it just as easy for you.
Yeah.
They'll deliver or curbside pickup. They understand the need for that, and they do that. And I think secondly, I don't know, I think this is something we should all be thinking about childcare in our communities. And I do not pretend to have the answer, but I think COVID pandemic really brought that out, the need for safe childcare and how do parents deal with that. Well, COVID was a perfect example. You had the children home from school, you still had to work to feed them. And it's an issue we should all be thinking about that there's quality childcare in our communities.
Thank you.
And I think that we just need to reach across the fence to our neighbors, you know, to start, you know, those relationships. It's really easy. I know I do it sometimes, well, most of the time. You come home and you do what you need to do, and, you know, that relationship building can provide networking and to provide, you know, I put it out in the universe. I needed a handyman, and you know that it's hard to ask.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, and I think that a lot of us kind of got used to that ideal that it's okay. Hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? The old cliche, but it's it's a snowball sometimes, so that you build the relationships, so you build that network, you build that your own infrastructure for what you might need down the road. And it comes back to that we're all human, and we need a little bit, or some of us, like myself, need a lot of human contact. Because I think at the end of the day, that's the one big thing that we share, is that we're all human.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Karen, Michelle, thank you both so much.
Oh,
this has
thank
been
you, Hope.
this has been wonderful, excellent. I hope you all have enjoyed and learned just as I have. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we also hope that this inspired you to think about how your choices impact your local economy. We'd also like you to join us next month for our next Us, Past, Present, and Future panel. We'll look at education, and we'll talk about the power of education with the focus on Williamsburg's Brace School. We'd like to send a big thank you to our donors, especially to Mark and Iris Koblitz. Without them, Us, Past, Present, and Future would not be possible. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.